One school day, a boy named Tom was sitting in a class and doing math. It was 6 more minutes until the end of class. As he was doing his homework, something caught his eye. His desk was next to the window, and he turned and looked to the grass outside. He saw what looked like a picture. When school was over, he ran to the spot where he saw it. He ran fast so that no one else could grab it. He picked up the picture and smiled. It was a picture of the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. She had a dress with tights on and red shoes, and her hand was formed into a peace sign. She was so beautiful that he wanted to meet her, so he ran all over the school and asked everyone if they knew her or have ever seen her before. But everyone he asked said no. He was devastated. When he got home, he asked his older sister if she knew the girl, but unfortunately, she also said no. It was very late, so Tom walked up the stairs, placed the picture on his bedside table, and went to sleep. In the middle of the night, Tom was awakened by a tap on his window. It was like a nail tapping. He got scared. After the tapping stopped, he heard a giggle. He saw a shadow near his window, so he got out of his bed, walked toward his window, opened it up, and followed the giggling. By the time he reached it, it was gone. The next day, he asked his neighbors if they knew the girl in the picture. Everybody said, "Sorry, no." When his mother came home, he even asked her if she knew her. She also said no. He went to his room, placed the picture on his desk, and fell asleep. Once again, he was awakened by a tapping. He took the picture and followed the giggling. He walked across the road when suddenly, he got hit by a car. He was dead, with the picture in his hand. The driver got out of the car and tried to help him, but it was too late. Suddenly, he saw the picture and picked it up. He saw a cute girl holding up 3 fingers.
She recommended the room in the basement of her dorm as soon as she realized she would have to pull an all-nighter in order to prepare for tomorrow's final exam. Her roommate, Jenna, liked to get to bed early, so she packed up everything she thought she would need and went downstairs to study and study and study some more. It was 2 o'clock when she realized that she had left one of the textbooks upstairs on her bed. With a dramatic sigh, she rose and climbed the stairs slowly to her 3rd floor dorm room. The lights were dim in the long hallway, and the old boards creaked under her weary tread footsteps. She reached her room and turned the handles as softly as she could, pushing the door open just enough to slip inside so that the hall lights wouldn't wake her roommate up. The room was filled with a strange metallic smell. She frowned a bit, her arms breaking out into chills. There was a strange feeling of malice in the room, as if a malevolent gaze were fixed up upon her. It was a mind trick. The all-nighter was catching up with her. She could hear Jenna breathing on the far side of the room, a heavy sound, almost as if she had been running. Jenna must have picked up a cold during the last tense week before finals. She crept along the wall until she reached her bed, groping among the covers for the stray history book. In the silence, she could hear a steady drip, 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 drip sound. She sighed silently. Facilities would have to come to fix the sink in the bathroom again. Her fingers closed on the textbook. She picked it up softly and withdrew from the room as silently as she could. Relieved to be out of the room, she hurried back downstairs, collapsed into an overstuffed chair and studied until 6 o'clock. She finally decided that enough was enough. If she slipped upstairs now, she could get a couple of hours sleep before her 9 o'clock exam. The first of the sun's rays were beaming through the windows as she slowly slid the door open, hoping not to awake Jenna. Her nose was met by an earthy metallic smell a second before her eyes registered the scene in her dorm room. Jenna was spread-eagled on top of her bed against the far wall, her throat cut from ear to ear and her nightdress stained with blood. 2 drops of the blood fell from the saturated blanket with a drip-drip nose that sounded like a leaky faucet. Scream after scream poured from her mouth, but she couldn't stop herself any more than she could cease wringing her hands all along the hallway. Doors slammed and footsteps came running down the passage. Within the moments, other students had gathered in her doorway, and one of her friends gripped her arm with a shaking hand and pointed at a trembling finger towards the wall. Her eyes widened in shock at what she saw. Then she fainted into her friend's arms. On the wall above her bed, written in her roommate's blood, were the words, "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light?"
I must have been 6 or 7 when I lived in Lebanon. The country was ravaged by war at the time, and murders were common and frequent. I remember during a particularly vicious era, when the bombings rarely stopped, I would stay at home, sitting in front of my television, watching a very, very strange show. It was a kids' show that lasted about 30 minutes, and contained strange and sinister images. To this day, I believe it was a thinly veiled attempt on the part of the media to use scare tactics to keep kids in place, because the moral of every episode revolved around very uptight ideologies. Stuff like, bad kids stay up late, bad kids have their hands under the covers when they sleep, and bad kids steal food from the fridge at night. It was very weird, and in Arabic to top it off. I didn't understand much of it, but for the most part, the images were very graphic and comprehensive. The thing that stuck with me the most, however, was the closing scene. It remained much the same in every episode. The camera would zoom in on an old, rusted, closed door. As it got closer to the door, strange and sometimes even agonizing screams would become more audible. It was extremely frightening, especially for children's programming. Then a text would appear on the screen in Arabic, reading, "That's where the bad kids go." Eventually, both the image and the sound would fade out, and that would be the end of the episode. About 15 or 16 years later, I became a journalistic photographer. That show had been in my mind all my life, popping up in my thoughts sporadically. Eventually, I had had enough, and decided to do some research. I finally managed to uncover the location of the studio where much of that channel's programming had been recorded. Upon further research, and eventually traveling on site, I found out it was now desolate, and had been abandoned after the big war ended. I entered the building with my camera. It was burnt out from the inside. Either a fire had broken out, or someone had wanted to incinerate all of the wooden furniture. After a few hours of cautiously making my way into the studio and snapping pictures, I found an isolated, out-of-the-way room. After having to break through a few old locks and managing to break the heavy door open, I remained frozen in the doorway for several long minutes. Traces of blood, feces, and tiny bone fragments lay scattered across the floor. It was a small room and an extremely morbid scene. What truly frightened me, though, what made me turn away and never want to come back, was the bolted, caged microphone hanging from the ceiling in the middle of the room.
So-and-so's friend, a girl in her teens, is babysitting for a family in Newport Beach. The family is wealthy and has a very large house, you know the sort, with a ridiculous amount of rooms. Anyways, the parents are going out for a late dinner movie night. The father tells the babysitter that once the children are in bed, she should go into the specific room. He doesn't really want her wandering around the house and watch TV there. The parents take off and soon she gets the kids into bed and goes to the room to watch TV. She tries watching TV, but she is disturbed by a clown statue in the corner of the room. She tries to ignore it for as long as possible, but it starts freaking her out so much that she can't handle it anymore. So she resorts to calling the father and asks, "Hey, the kids are in the bed, but is it okay if I switch rooms? This clown statue is really creeping me out." The father says seriously, "Get the kids, go next door and call 911. She asks, "What's going on?" He responds, "Just go next door, and once you call the police, call me back." She gets the kids, goes next door and calls the police. When the police are on their way, she calls the father back and asks, "So really, what's going on?" He responds, "We don't have a clown statue." He then further explains that the children have been complaining about a clown watching them as they sleep. He and his wife had just blown it off, assuming they were having nightmares. The police arrived and apprehended the clown, who turns out to be a midget clown. I guess he was some homeless person dressed as a clown who somehow got into the house and had been living there for several weeks. He would come into the kids' rooms at nights and watch them while they slept. As the house was so large, he was able to avoid detection, surviving after foods and etc. He had been in the TV room right before the babysitter came in there. When she entered, he didn't have enough time to hide, so he just froze up in place and pretended to be a statue.
She lived deep in the forest in a tiny cottage and sold herbal remedies for a living. Folks living in the town nearby called her Bloody Mary and said she was a witch. No one dared cross the old crone, for fear that their cows would go dry, their food stores rot away before winter, their children take sick of fever, or any number of terrible things that an angry witch could do to her neighbors and their children. Then the little girls in the village began to disappear, one by one. No one could find out where they had gone. Grief-stricken families searched the woods, the local buildings, and all the houses and barns, but there was no sign of the missing girls. A few brave souls even went to Bloody Mary's home in the woods to see if the witch had taken the girls, but she denied any knowledge of the disappearances. Still, it was noted that her haggard appearance had changed. She looked younger, more attractive. The neighbors were suspicious, but they could find no proof that the witch had taken their young ones. Then came the night when the daughter of the miller rose from her bed and walked outside, following an enchanted sound no one else could hear. The miller's wife had a toothache and was sitting up in the kitchen treating the tooth with an herbal remedy when her daughter left the house. She screamed for her husband and followed the girl out the door. The miller came running in his nightshirt, and together they tried to restrain the girl, but she kept breaking away from them and heading out of town. The desperate cries of the miller and his wife woke the neighbors. They came to assist the frantic couple. Suddenly, a sharp-eyed farmer gave a shout and pointed towards a strange light at the edge of the woods. A few townsmen followed him out into the field and saw Bloody Mary standing beside a large oak tree, holding a magic wand that was pointed towards the miller's house. She was glowing with an unearthly light as she set her evil spell upon the miller's daughter. The townsmen grabbed their guns and their pitchforks and ran toward the witch. When she heard the commotion, Bloody Mary broke off her spell and fled back into the woods. The far-sighted farmer had loaded his gun with silver bullets in case the witch ever came after his daughter. He took aim and shot her. The bullet hit Bloody Mary in the hip and she fell to the ground. The angry townsmen leapt upon her and carried her back to the field, where they built a huge bonfire and burned her at the stake. As she burned, Bloody Mary screamed a curse at the villagers. If anyone mentioned her name aloud before a mirror, she would send her spirit to revenge herself upon them for her terrible death. When she was dead, the villagers went to the house in the woods and found the unmarked graves of the little girls the evil witch had murdered. She had used their blood to make her young again. From that day to this, Anyone foolish enough to chant Bloody Mary's name 3 times before a darkened mirror will summon the vengeful spirit of the witch. It is said that she will tear their bodies to pieces and rip their souls from their mutilated bodies. The souls of these unfortunate ones will burn in torment as Bloody Mary once was burned, and they will forever be trapped in the mirror. What's up, everybody? This is the Lone Wolf here. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed these 5 creepypastas and urban legends. I would like to give a special shout out to Dr. Grimm for teaming up with me in this video. He is an awesome horror narrator, and he deserves much more attention than what he currently has. So if you guys enjoyed listening to his narrations, feel free to check him out and show him some love. There will be a link to his channel in the description, along with an icon that will appear on screen at the end of this closing. If you're new to my channel, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing if you enjoyed my narrations. Turn on the bell for notifications and join the Lone Wolf Pack. If any of you guys want to send me a message, like a personal scary story or a creepypasta recommendation, or you just want to chat with me, there will be a link to my email account, my Twitter account, and my Discord server in the description. There will also be links in the description for all of the music artists that I used in this video, along with each individual track that I used for those of you interested in the music. And last but certainly not least, if any of you guys have any ideas or tips for me to make my videos better, please leave me a comment or send me a personal message. Until next time, stay spooky. And remember, the hunt begins when the moon is full. Sweet dreams.